Every time there's been uncertainty, as a leader, your job is to figure out what pivots need to take place. In life, we think we have big problems. Whether it's marital problems, whether it's business problems, whether it's health problems, you think your problems are the biggest problems and no one else is experiencing your problems. When you have perspective and experience can solve a lot of life's problems. You don't have to be right on every decision. You just have to make a decision and be right on most of them. Change is a constant. If you make the right decisions, most of the time, not all the time, you will end up winning.
Remember, adversity is your advantage.
Hey friends, welcome back to another amazing episode of the CEO Show with yours truly. Another month, my man B back in the studio.
Good to be back in studio, Bryce.
All right, well, holy smokes, November, election, changing times. We're going to talk about change today, which is really the story of an entrepreneurship as well. So.
It is, which is also a constant in our lives.
Totally.
Yeah. It's just obviously that the election just took place. It's a much bigger change than most people are used to because it comes every 4 years. But beyond that, change is a constant. So let's dive right into it.
So, my dude, you've had over 2 decades of business experience navigating through a lot of change and challenge. Let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. Can you think of a time of one of your biggest challenges that you've navigated and what the learning lesson was? So that way we can talk to our audience about the changes that are happening and will happen right now.
Yeah. So I can think of several. One I can think of that is very big that you and I just went through in 2020.
Yeah.
Right? The pandemic and what impact it had on our big business, Fit Body Bootcamp, and how we navigated, pivoted, and came out as winners on the other side of it. But it was scary. Whether you're a mega business owner or a small business owner, it's a scary time. And I also can think about other times like the housing market crash of 2008, how it impacted the initial launch of Fit Body Bootcamp. I started Fit Body Bootcamp back in late 2010, 2011, and then beyond that, we franchised in 2012, and that was just on the heels of the housing market crash with unemployment rates through the roof. But whether it's when Fit Body Bootcamp was big or Fit Body Bootcamp was still tiny with like a handful of locations, I can tell you that every time there's been uncertainty, as a leader, your job is to figure out what pivots need to take place. The thing that you can't do, and I speak from experience on this, is sit and wait for more information. And you know this from the pandemic, right? We were like, all right, this is all we know, and this is what we know. We wish we had more information, but we don't. So let's act on what we know. And if you remember, we were doing 2 L10, level 10 meetings a day. And just to kind of give the audience visual on what a level 10 meeting is, if you ever read the book Traction by Gino Wickman, he talks about the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, which is how we run all of our companies here. And EOS has a meeting agenda outline called Level 10 meetings. They're 90 minutes once a week. We were doing 2 Level 10 meetings a day, every single day during the pandemic, and then messaging to our franchisees. And these franchisees are many of them are in different states, some in different countries.
Yeah.
And hey, here's what you do, and here's what you guys do. Those in this state do this, and if you're a blue state, do that. If you're a red state, do this. And I share that because the luxury that a leader doesn't have is the time to sit and wait for more information, because while you're sitting and waiting, time passes you by. So my first experience with this was when I owned the rights to an LA Fitness, the personal training rights inside of an LA Fitness. So I was a small-time business owner. And I owned the personal training rights, which meant that there couldn't be all these independent personal trainers in there, that there could only be one personal training company, mine. And I had like 5 or 6 personal trainers working for me in that LA Fitness. And I would pay LA Fitness $5,000 a month rent. And if I'm making an average of like $35,000 a month in revenue, I pay my $5,000 a month in rent, I pay my payroll for my 4 or 5 trainers, and the rest of the profits is for me. Well, one of my personal trainers, I don't think you've even heard this story. One of my personal trainers let it slip to the general manager of that LA Fitness location that we're making $35,000 a month. And of course, this general manager knew that we were only paying $5,000 a month rent. That was my agreement with LA Fitness headquarters. So, but that general manager gets paid on total club revenue, including any tenants in there like me. And so he reaches out to corporate office and he's like, hey, they're making $30,000, $35,000 a month. And I had an open-ended contract. It wasn't like, hey, for the next 12 months. My contract had gone and flipped to month to month. And so he reaches out to headquarters at LA Fitness, which is located right here in Irvine. And he said, hey, Bedros' personal training company is paying $5,000 a month in rent. They're doing $30,000, $35,000 a month in revenue. Literally the next month, my rent jumped up to $19,000 a month.
4X did.
Mm-hmm. And I had some decisions to make. Do I keep going here at LA Fitness? Can I raise my prices? Do I switch from one-on-one personal training to small group personal training? Is LA Fitness going to be okay with me changing the model of the personal training? Can I change the pay structure of my personal trainers? Do I look at opening up my own personal training studios? In 1 hour, when I got that message, in 1 hour, those were like the 6 or 7 big questions. And each one of those takes a lot of research, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the luxury of time. I had less than a month before my rent was going to go to almost $20,000 a month. And so I had to start pivoting, making decisions, figuring out a small group was going to work, how we're going to market that, and how we're going to pay the coaches moving forward, and how we're going to raise our prices but still be competitive. And so change is a constant. And if you make the right decisions, most of the time, not all of the time, you will end up winning. It's what led to me opening up my own personal training studios, Premier Results. Had that not happened, had LA Fitness not put the screws to me, I would not have had the desire to take the risk to open up my own personal training studio. Because at that point I said, well, at this point I'm paying at $19,000 a month, almost $20,000 a month. If I go and get my own personal training studio out there, pay rent and operating expenses, it'll still be under $20,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So I'll still have upside. Now I could only target LA Fitness clients, but if I have my own personal training studio, I can target the whole city.
Totally.
And that's what led to Premier Results, my one-on-one personal training studios. Ultimately, I ended up selling those gyms, being a consultant to gym owners, right? And that led to ultimately this whole Fit Body Bootcamp idea came to be, which is now an international franchise and with locations popping open everywhere. But even back then, my mentor, Jim Franco, was like, make a decision. I was like, I don't know what decision to make. I got some big decisions to make. Group training, pay structure, pricing structure. Is LA Fitness going to make me sign a contract? Do I sign a lease out there? And what does build out look like? I've never opened up my own gym. He was like, you don't have to be right on every decision. You just have to make a decision and be right on most of them. Years later, I heard Warren Buffett say that about his investment strategies. He says, I'm not right on every decision. I'm just right on most of them. And if you can be right on 51 out of 100 decisions, you're winning.
And you also have the luxury and opportunity to course correct as well, because if you just get stuck by analysis by paralysis, you actually don't even know what the right decision is. So best case scenario, you make the right decision. Worst case scenario, you make the wrong decision. But you hopefully have enough fortitude to realize, oh, shoot, I made the wrong decision. I can have the opportunity to course correct.
Bingo. That's exactly right. And it's funny you say that, because when a problem is presented to you and you try and gather as quickly as much information as you can, then you have to make a decision. You still have enough time, ideally, hopefully, to course correct, as you said. If you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. So if I waited I'm just going to kick this can down the road until I have 4 days left before the month is over, now a decision will be made for you, right? And it's never the favorable decision for you. When circumstances end up making the decision for you because you kicked the can down the road, you procrastinated, you try to fact find forever and ended up gathering all this information, but too late to make any real decision that's going to benefit you, a decision is going to be made for you. And the decision is shut down or go out of business. And that's how we end up years later telling the story of how things went wrong for me. When even today, 2024, we hear people saying, oh man, 2008 housing market crash. I was killing it. I was doing great in 2004, 5, 6, 7. And then I lost it all. Well, some people actually won during that housing market crash. And that's because they made different decisions, faster decisions, better decisions, and didn't have to sit around and gather all the facts.
So let's talk about your mental processing. And I was there on the second go with COVID, which was freaking wild. I remember like vividly, like yesterday, so 4 years ago, March 16th, we're in a boardroom. And interestingly enough, for how crazy it was, you obviously are a leader and, having a cool, calm, and collected nature about you. Our leadership team, we responded very well. We're actually very calm, very cool, collected. Yeah. We just got into action. We started making decisions, meeting 2 times a day. You started Facebooking Live, whatever decision we make. So we pushed out that communication. And it wasn't perfect, and the world was going wild. But at the end of the day, we got the job done. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, though, back to the position that you had or the predicament with LA Fitness. You were 15 years younger. How did that mental process, like how was the weight and what was the differences in terms of how you showed up making those decisions?
That's a really good question to ask, because as with the pandemic, which was just 4 years ago, we had a lot more to risk and lose, right?
Yeah, tons more. Not even comparison.
Our operational costs are obscene. Our franchisees in different states and different jurisdictions. Remember, some states like California, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, police departments, cops were going to gyms and fining gym owners for being in business, not for peddling drugs, not for doing anything illegal, but for running a health and fitness business. And in other states like Texas and Florida, et cetera, they were just like, hey, just run this thing and make sure people stay clean and sanitized, et cetera. And so, but we had so much to lose during the 2020 pandemic in terms of, because we're a big business with big operating expenses, big payroll, big advertising costs. Yet, when I had my little personal training department inside of LA Fitness, it seemed more daunting. I was much more cool, calm, collected, organized in 2020 than I was back in the year 2000, 1999, 2000, when that took place.
So the problem was exponentially bigger in 2020. But what I'm hearing from you, B, is it felt actually more daunting 20 years, even though the problem was smaller.
Yeah, looking at it, I had 4 personal trainers and 4 full-time personal trainers, 1 part-time personal trainer, and what we call the front desk girl, literally a girl in high school who ran our personal training front desk and called new LA Fitness members and offered them 1 free personal training session. And on the strength of that personal training session, you would either buy personal training from us or not. Like, that was my business model, like a total of 5.5 employees, right? And, 30, 35,000 a month. Now we're making millions a month in terms of revenue across our franchise brand.
Hundreds of locations, hundreds of owners, tons of coaches,
right?
Like so many more jurisdictions. And
they all have their own thoughts, feelings, and ideas of how we should be operating as headquarters, right? Yeah. Whereas here it was just me and my decision. But I was like, oh my God, this is so scary. If I make any wrong decision, it's over, because we think in extremes, right? We think in black and white, ones and zeros, where if I make this one decision, it's over. And I'm back on my parents' couch. I'm flipping burgers somewhere. And I remember every decision was like, my mentor, Jim Franco, was like, make a decision. And he was helping me make these decisions, but ultimately the weight of it landed on me. And I remember it was so overwhelming, so daunting, because I thought everything was going to be catastrophic if it didn't work out. Now, since then, back then I was in 1999, I was in my mid-20s. Didn't have the emotional capacity of the entrepreneur I am today. Today, when the pandemic happened, I'm 50 now, so I was 46, right? And had a lot more stripes and a lot more scars on my body. And I was like, all right, here's how we're going to handle this. I knew no one decision was going to be catastrophic. I knew, in fact, we could have a string of bad decisions and it wouldn't be catastrophic. It might cost us money, but it wasn't going to be like any one of us are on our parents' couch and destitute and living in the gutters. What we fabricate in our head is so extreme and catastrophic that it does cause paralysis and does begin to create a almost tunnel vision. And we're like, oh my gosh, I don't have any other options. But when you realize, like, okay, things are going to be okay. Like, this too shall pass. The entire world is dealing with this pandemic, not just me. And what taught me this was, in life, we think we have big problems, whether it's marital problems, whether it's business problems, whether it's health problems. You think your problems are the biggest problems and no one else is experiencing your problems. And since I surf, when I go surfing, I go to Dana Point and I'm on the great mighty Pacific Ocean. And when you're on this like surfboard, straddling your board, and you're just looking out into the ocean, waiting for a wave to come to catch it, you realize I am such a tiny little speck on the surface of this water.
Insignificant, man.
Insignificant. And then I can't tell you how many times I would turn to the guy next to me, I'm like, Hey, isn't it funny like how we have these life problems? Because, anyone that knows surfing knows that waves aren't just hitting left and right. You have to wait for sets of waves to come, and then the ocean will calm down for a few minutes, and then sets of waves come again. So when we're all just straddling a board waiting for a good wave to come, you're just yucking it up with the people around you. And I'm like, hey, isn't it interesting how like our problems seem so big to us until we're on the ocean? And the guy's like, yeah, man, absolutely. I had this problem and that problem. And I get in the water and I realize like I've got no problems. And look at what we're doing. We're surfing and we're like a tiny little speck. And who knows what kind of creatures are swimming under us and da-da-da. I'm like, you're absolutely right. So that's really what it is. So when you have perspective and experience can solve a lot of life's problems. Now, you can have perspective, but if you're like new to business and you've never done business before, so you don't have experience, that's where a good mentor comes in, right? And going back to what we do with Fit Body Bootcamp, the entire franchise model, whether Fit Body Bootcamp or Jiffy Lube or a 7-Eleven, if you're going to open up a convenience store, you're probably better off opening up a 7-Eleven because they've done it for so long. They've been through every economic adversary, competition, whatever. They know anything that can go wrong. And so they're going to mentor you when things do go wrong versus if you open up your own, convenience store and something goes wrong, you're left to figure it out yourself. And so perspective that, hey, my problems aren't as big as I think they are. And then the experience of life or through a mentor can solve a lot of problems.
Amen to that. What about a proactive approach you took, B? So, I mean, as you mentioned, just those things alone develops your business prowess. So that way you develop more emotional resilience to handle, COVID, which was exponentially bigger, but handled it way better. If someone's listening to this right now and they haven't been through challenges like that and they need to level up their self-resilient quotient, from your perspective, how can they proactively do that in addition of just life, handling you challenge that you're naturally just going to hopefully naturally mature with time?
Yeah.
But what specific things can our audience do to create more self-resilience?
It's funny you say that. I read a study 2 weeks ago, and the study in many ways was kind of sad and heartbreaking. But what they had done is they had followed these kids into adulthood for 25 years. And they found that these, two sets of kids that came from rough upbringings, they, maybe single family home or maybe an abusive home, maybe a home with, like where I came from, Section 8 housing, food stamps. I was an immigrant to the country, and so you're treated differently and, called names. But they found that these sets of kids that came from adversity and hardship, and they proved this point, that small amounts of adversity consistently over time built these kids into amazingly resilient and resourceful adults. Those that had cushy lives that weren't peppered with problems, challenges, adversities to help forge them mentally and emotionally. As adults, they weren't able to deal with hardship and challenges as well. And so knowing that, and I think I've instinctively done that with Andrew and Chloe.
That's my next question, actually, because coming from your situation's night and day, but how have you manufactured that so that way
Bingo.
they're not in that particular situation?
Bingo. I always felt, and because remember, I just read the study two weeks ago, but I'd always felt that, I never went to college. I dropped out of like junior college 32 days into junior college. I never got good grades in school. I was just a bad student. I wasn't good at learning, but
Academically.
But I also knew that, as I started gaining money, I was buying all types of self-help, personal development books and audio cassettes and CDs and like you name it. And then when I could afford coaches and mentors, I would work with them. But I knew that there was some superpower that I have through the adversities and challenges and setbacks that I faced as a young man, 6-year-old, coming to the United States and growing up with hardship.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I think, now look, and the thing they stressed in that study was small amounts of hardship consistently over time, right? So in other words, if someone's just being physically beaten, that's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. That young man or young lady is going to grow up probably to be a monster.
Yeah, trauma, that's
right?
PTSD hard.
Yeah. They're going to have to deal with some vices, alcohol, et cetera in the future. But those that grow up with small amounts of adversity that test their resilience and resourcefulness emotionally and mentally over time. So I was like, all right, I got to do this for Andrew and Chloe. I knew I had some kind of superpower because of that, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I read the study 2 weeks ago. So when, Andrew's now 19, Chloe's 17, just started taking them to the gym with me when they were 4 or 5 years old and working out and letting them get sore. And, the studies people always cite these bullshit studies that came out back in the day, which are now proven to be wrong. Like, you're going to stunt your kids' growth if they weight train. My kids, I'd have them do box jumps and bicep curls with dumbbells, like, 3-pound dumbbells and stuff, and sprint up the driveway with me. You've seen my property, and hey, I'm sprinting up the driveway. And I remember Andrew was so scared. He was so tired. He'd hold on to the driveway. He'd go on all fours and hold on because it's like steep. A hill. Yeah, it's steep. Exactly. I was like, buddy, get up. We're going to sprint. You got to beat dad. And as he got older, I'd make him carry a kettlebell with him. Same with Chloe. And then I'd have them drive down. They had this thing, a little scooter that sits low to the ground, and they would shoot down the driveway, and I'd open the garage door so they can just shoot into the garage door, and you guys got to use your feet to stop, and if you can't, you're going to hit that back wall. So I would constantly put adversity in their way, help them overcome their fears. And then I remember one July 4th, I was like, all right, every July 4th, we're going to do an ice bath. So me and Andrew would empty 80% of the water in the hot tub, right? Because a pool and hot tub, we'd 80%, and we'd go to Albertsons, buy truck bed full of ice, dump all that in there, and then as a family, we'd all jump in the hot tub ice bath for 5 minutes before we could have our barbecues and fun times, etc. And then, of course, as I started doing Suckfest with me, and the one where we ended up doing a whole marathon and over 1,000 repetitions in the gym. I think you came out and did that.
Of course. By the way, do you consider that doing a marathon? I've done 2 marathons in my life: the New York City Marathon in 2015, and the Suckfest with you.
Yeah,
I fully consider that a marathon.
That's a marathon.
It was 26.2 in a circuit plus weight training. It took 12 hours to do.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, man.
Oh, I would say whatever is higher than a marathon, you did that.
Yeah.
That Suckfest that I came up. Actually, Andrew helped me come up with that. He's like, Dad, we always do 2 exercises for 15 reps and then run out the front door and run around the building. He goes, didn't you say you had run a marathon? I go, yeah. He goes, when we run around the building, it's 0.2 of a mile. Okay. He goes, so we need to run whatever that number was, 143 times or 200 and some odd times around the building. Oh. And he goes, if each time we also do 2 sets of 15 in the gym, it would be 1,000 some odd reps. And I was like, son, you just created Suckfest. He's like, there we go. And 12, 13 hours, right? And people's bodies were seizing up. But my kids grew up doing this crazy stuff, dude.
Yeah.
And so today they're massively resilient. Chloe's on the flag football team. Andrew's played all types of sports, and he does combatives. They are there for their friends who are going through mental, emotional hardship, and they're mentoring and coaching their friends. And it's all a byproduct of that. And so I think there is, and by the way, people are like, well, I'm an adult now. How do I fix this? Give yourself 12 months of hardship, planned, strategized hardship. Intentional. And you will be a different human after those 12 months. The project does this. Grown men come to the project, and we just retired the project, 5 years and 20 classes. But it's a 75-hour experience for men who want to mentally, physically, and emotionally go through hardship to develop higher levels of resiliency, resourcefulness, and build their businesses, because there's a lot of business coaching and life coaching involved. Men who have never done anything like that, if they stick through the whole 75 hours, the thing I hear from them literally 30 days after graduation is I'll get a text message. Hey, man, I had another life problem. And that same life problem used to register a 9 or a 10 on my Richter scale of stress.
The LA Fitness analogy back in the day?
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
What is that problem?
Now it's nothing. They go, it registers a 2 or a 3. And they would always use the word, I projected through that shit. Whatever the problem, life problem was.
Now it became a verb.
It became a verb, right? And I was like, ooh, projected through that shit. And so, if we think that, hey, this can only happen when we're young, not true. You can build a high level of resilience and resourcefulness. And it's funny, man, because notice I didn't say do this in business. Do physical hardship. Do things that keep you awake. Do the Suckfest. The whole idea of Suckfest is we start at night when the sun goes down, and then we hike all of Chino Hills until the sun comes up. So basically, we've worked all day. We've done our normal day. We've worked, run our businesses, our companies. But then at 4:50, because we always do it in December, I think it was 4:59 or something, right as the sun's going down, we start hiking until 6:13 in the morning when the sun comes up.
That was Suckfest 1B.
Yeah.
And then it evolved to Suckfest 2, which
was crazy, the marathon one, and it just got crazier and crazier. But think about this. You're tired, you're sleepy, you're hungry, you're cold because it's December. and you haven't trained for this, part of Suckfest is to not train for it, and you're just going to go. And you're going to keep going. And when the conversations in your head start about stopping and quitting, and you've done enough, and you've done more than your neighbors and more than your friends, and that you just keep going anyway. Mm-hmm. And then when you see the sun finally peak over the mountain there, we stop and we all high-five each other, and we all schlep to our cars and go home and fall asleep for a few hours. Mm-hmm. And your body's sore for the next week. Like, that is Suckfest, and it sucks. And if you keep putting yourself through sucky situations intentionally that are physically, mentally, emotionally draining, believe it or not, you become a better entrepreneur, a better leader, a better communicator. Because I don't know about you, but I know about me, and I know about you.
You do know about me.
When you're walking for 13 hours straight through the night, you start having conversations and dialogue with yourself, and you're like, I think I just channeled Mozart. I think I just channeled like Einstein. Like, you start having some deep, meaningful conversations. Like, I think I just channeled Carl Jung. You know, like, I'm literally healing myself. Like, you start going, because we're not looking at our phones. We're not distracted with phone calls. We're just going through the darkness. Like, that first time we did it, the only interruption we had was when the cops pulled us over at 1 a.m. Like, okay, what are you group of weirdos doing? Remember that?
Well, not only that, but that was when our beautiful governor, Mr. Newsom, put a curfew on.
Yeah.
So us knuckleheads were walking around Chino Hills, and the cop came over, and we initially thought we were going to get, I guess, thrown away for breaking the curfew. But you navigate that for us.
But that's what it takes, man. And so you end up having these like big epiphanies and breakthroughs, and you go, okay, what's limiting me in my life? Because when you have 12, 13 hours of just like solitude to go and suffer, you really do meet your higher self. The higher self is only produced through adversity. And when you meet that higher self, and it's your conscience, you know, when we shut all the noise and distractions, our conscience speaks clearly to us and tells us what we need to know and what we need to do. And you're like, aha, I know the plan. And that is resiliency and resourcefulness. And then to be able to stack that W, knowing that everyone else is sleeping in the city right now, I'm stacking up miles in the cold with these savages. Mm-hmm. Like, I've got a superpower that none of these people do out here. You know what I mean? And that
builds
gives
momentum, too.
Yeah, it gives you a level of confidence and competency and sure-footedness. And that's a good thing, man. And that bleeds into business, that bleeds into your family, that builds into your communication, that bleeds into your leadership. And that's the cool thing about adversity and suffering.
Love this. All right. So now we talked about little abstract examples. I want to dive in a little bit. And when I knew we are kindred spirits is when you started talking about the intentional structured 6-week challenges you did.
Yes.
So we just talked about for our audience, they abstract a couple things. But when I met you, B, this is after me moving to Brazil for 2 years, getting in shape, just having this always like in factory installed desire to challenge myself, test my mettle. Now I do my cold plunge every morning. I do my sauna. I try to train myself, brush my teeth, my left hand, trying to continuously stack those wins, challenge myself, putting myself through adversity. When I heard you speak, this is over a decade ago, and I can't remember your first 6-week challenge, but you've done surfing. You've done
marathon.
Marathon's the first. Yeah. You've done jiu-jitsu. You've done surfing as well. So
rock climbing, guitar lessons, salsa dancing, and now I just finished up a 6-week chess challenge.
So how does that work? And I want to give like the audience examples specifically of like something that you've done that they can replicate to force that resilience, if you will, to be a better entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah, so all those things that we just listed off that I did, including improv class. I've taken improv for 6 weeks, public speaking. Here's how it works. The rule is this. You do, and why 6 weeks, by the way? God rest his soul, Dr. Bruce Nadler. He's now deceased. But he was on VH1 and MTV, he was the plastic surgeon to the stars back in the day. Yeah, he was always on VH1 and
VH1 takes me back, man. Holy smokes.
Yeah. And MTV. And he was always on those shows, as he was doing consultations with all these stars as a plastic surgeon. But he was a dear friend of mine. And he had told me, he goes, hey, Bedros, you ever wonder why a cast is on for 6 weeks? Like when you go to a doctor, you broke your arm, they put a cast on in 6 weeks. Or in my case, I tore my bicep, they reattached it in 6 weeks, you're good to go. It's like, yeah, what's the thing with 6 weeks? He goes, 85 to 95% of your body's healing, whether it's tissue or bone, happens within the first 6 weeks. And so that's really it. And he goes, now they're starting to find out that in 6 weeks, a lot of neuroplasticity can take place if you're constantly testing yourself through something new.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, doc, is this for sure? He goes, yeah. I go, great. I've been telling myself that I'm not built to run. And the marathon challenge, and it was just going to be that one challenge, was the idea was I kept telling myself that I'm I'm big, I'm strong. God's designed me to lift weights, right? And so,
which is probably true.
yes, yeah.
But you can still do other things.
Correct.
Is the point here.
Good point.
Yeah.
We all have factory installed
Yeah.
superpowers.
Yeah.
And I think my factory installed superpowers are to be big and strong.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you do more of that in the gym, because that comes naturally to you, you're like, oh, see, it's easy for me.
Yeah.
But what was not easy was when I needed to just like run from here to the car. I'd be like out of breath. Like I'm heavy, I'm dense, and I'd be out of breath. And also another reason was because I never did any kind of cardiovascular training. If I wanted to get lean, I just cleaned up my diet and I trained faster in the gym in terms of weights, and so I would get leaner. But I never actively did any cardiovascular or long distance endurance. And I was just like, tooey, right? I'm not made for that. And so, yeah, maybe I'm not factory installed made for that, but the human body is very pliable.
Oh, yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to do a 6-week challenge, something that I'm afraid of and that I'm not good at, running. Long distance. So I picked the marathon and I hired a running coach, Jill Brewer, and she made a running program for me. And I said, hey, at the end of 6 weeks, I need to run the San Diego Marathon. She was like, I beg you, just do the half marathon. I go, no, it's got to be a full marathon. She goes, you're going to be very hurt. You're going to be sore. I go, that's fine. So she made a 6-week training program. I followed it to the T, the training program, the protocol, the nutrition and recovery protocol. And when I ran the San Diego Marathon in 4 hours and 52 minutes, not groundbreaking time.
But I'm sub 5. That's not bad for the first marathon.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
At 232 pounds, by the way.
Boom.
I was probably leaving like footprints in the asphalt, right? And I remember people running by me. You know, the marathon runners are built very differently than I am. They don't have traps that touch their ears. And they would just like look at me as they're running by and like shaking their head like, this knucklehead, he doesn't belong here, right? But I felt so proud of myself, man. And I realized like I had so many big epiphanies at the end of that marathon when I crossed the finish line and I did something that for years, decades, I told myself, I'm not made for this, right? So it taught me again, not just the marathon itself, but the 6 weeks of lacing up my shoelaces at 11 o'clock at night after saying goodnight to my wife and kids, tucking everybody to bed, hanging out with my wife. At 11 o'clock at night, she goes to bed, I lace up my shoes, and I go running at night 3 times a week. Because I was like, hey, my schedule is going to be 6 weeks, 3 times a week. Jill, build me a program. And she did. So from there, I was like, all right, all 6-week challenges now will be 6 weeks, 3 times a week. Jiu-jitsu, rock climbing, surfing, guitar lessons.
That was your structure.
So, that's my structure. Yeah. And each time I did, so the rule is pick something that you feel you're not good at, and that scares the bejesus out of you. And it will build so much resilience. Like in those 6 weeks, you develop such a high level of mastery for that thing because you're compressing, your time collapsing, I think like 6 months of training into 6 weeks. And so you're getting so much benefit out of it. It's such a concentrated rate. The project, 75 hours. Like they get like 4 years of personal growth experience in 75 hours. Like we're force feeding them like through a fire hydrant. And so I think if people were to do that, and by the way, if anyone wants to do the 6-week marathon challenge, they just need to go to bedroskeuilian.com/challenge, and they can literally get my entire marathon challenge for free. The training program, the recovery program, the nutrition program, and I added mindset and motivation videos from me, all for free. But I share this because it's about actively and intentionally structuring hardship into your life that forces you to level up to your next highest self. And when you do that, you're able to navigate all types of changing times.
Totally.
No matter who the president is, and no matter how the economy shifts, and no matter what level of marketing competition you might have.
Totally. And man, I mean, it could be, a structured, focused thing like that. I don't even know if I've shared this with you. I just touched on it, but I was talking to our Fit Body Mastermind yesterday just about how they can level up and do hard things. And, I've moved to a different country, learned a foreign language. Those are some big things, right? But it's consistency, getting in the gym every single day, eating well, planning your nutrition protocol. You're a lefty. My brother's a lefty as well. The smart ones are. About 10 years ago, I made the decision, you know what? Like, I want to create some neuroplasticity. So I've trained myself. I don't ever share this with you.
No.
I brush my teeth with my left hand and I put my wallet with my left side just to stack a little win, to build that, emotional resilience. So my message to the audience is, get focused in, get dialed in, create some structure, but putting yourself through adversity can end up in a wide variety of ways.
Yeah.
Is really the message here.
Yeah, and it needs to also be on a daily basis. Don't just do your annual suck fest or a 6-week challenge and then take a couple months off and another. Because I would do about 3 6-week challenges a year, right? It wasn't like one 6-week after another. But every day I face adversity intentionally. I wake up early, even though when I don't have to anymore. I go to the gym at 9 a.m. My goal is to like be in the gym at 9 a.m. It's my own gym. I could be there whenever I want. It's always empty. It's always the right time. But 9 a.m. because I know I can also distract myself and not get in there. I plan my meals, whether I'm traveling or not. I have a rule and a ritual for when I travel so that I can maintain hardship. It's easy to get off a plane, take an Uber to your hotel and go, I made it. And what does everyone do? They lay on the bed. I made it. My rule is my butt will never touch the bed because if it does, then my back touches the bed. If my back touches the bed, my head touches the pillow, and then I'm knocked out until the morning time. Instead, I'm like, best way, I heard Joe Rogan talk about this, to overcome a jet lag is to immediately go to the gym. So as soon as I land, I change into my workout clothes, never touching the bed, go right to the hotel gym. From the hotel gym, I figure out where my protein sources are on the city, Whole Foods, wherever, get my protein shakes, protein meals, snacks, etc. Load up my room because I do know that those Kit Kat bars and Snickers bars and chips that are sitting there for, on the counter, impulse purchase in your room, they're speaking to me every night. And I'm a fat kid by design, right? Again, my superpower is to be fat. I have to work to be strong and lean. And so knowing that, I have to have the alternatives there. And so I'm always doing the harder things because I know I'm just one easy decision away from slipping.
All right, my dude, as we round out this episode, and we've talked a little bit about, building adversity quotient, putting yourself through challenge, et cetera, what's one final piece of advice for our audience? There's a lot of change in the air right now, and our audiences are looking to make a change in their lives. They're stuck in their 9 to 5. They know they're meant for something more, but they're scared and, all the stuff that's going on right now. What's that final piece of advice to get them to move?
The final piece of advice is this, and this advice should land all the time, whether it's like 4 years from now, when it's the day after election like it is today, or any given time. And that is that you are the CEO of your life. There is no president on the left or the right that's going to have such a profound impact on your life that's going to change it for that much better. You know what I mean? The president is not going to determine my health. The president is not going to determine my economy. The president is not going to determine the safety and security of my family. The president is not going to determine the mindset that I carry and the emotional discipline that I have. The president is not going to determine how much social media screen sucking I'm doing and doom scrolling I'm doing. The president is not going to determine how much value I add to the community. These are all controllable elements that whether it's the left or the right, you are the CEO of your life. You get to control all of that. You are the president of your life. And every day you get to choose who the president is. It's you. And if you don't like the outcome of your life, fire the old version of you, the president that you don't like, and become the version of you, the president that you do like. And when you do that, the guy or gal in the White House won't matter as much as you think they should.
Boom! Mic drop.
Right?
That is the message, my friend.
Yeah.
Friends, I know you got a ton of value today. My one ask is drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. That way I can encourage a healthy conversation. And remember, adversity is your advantage. We'll see you in the next episode.